Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another exciting episode of Contourcast Podcast for Life. First of all, we thank you very much for being with us on this journey. Today is the season finale, and the feedback that you've been giving us has been phenomenal. We hope you've enjoyed watching each episode as much as we've enjoyed making it for you. You found out so much about Contour Software as an organization, as an industry player, and also, been witness to some of the very interesting personalities and people who contribute to making Contour software better every day. This season would not have been complete without hosting the person that we have on the hot seat today. And that is a person who's been not just with Contour software since the very beginning, but has also been part of the parent company, Constellation Software, since the beginning. 16 years to be exact. It is indeed my pleasure to introduce to you the Managing Director of Contour Software Pakistan, Syed Bilal Mahmood. Bilal, thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
I'm so glad to hear that. So, Bilal, 16 years is quite a long time to be associated with anyone or any organization. How has it been and how do you feel today?
I feel ecstatic.
Okay.
My boss joined the company at the real beginning, which was 1995. So that would make it 27 years for him. So 16 years is still just a beginning.
16 years, just a beginning. So let's go back right to the beginning. And that is the beginning of the transition from you being an Islamabad-based youngster who had his initial education here in Islamabad, who decided to move then to Canada for higher education. And then you entered into what I would call the marriage with the Constellation company. So how was the change and how was the transition from first, the cultures within the two countries? And secondly, what was the learning for you when you moved from a place like Islamabad to Canada? What learnings did you gather from there that have helped you along the way?
So absolutely, it was a very sheltered sort of existence. My parents both worked and they invested most of what they could into my education, my sister's education, and our only responsibility really was to get educated and take care of that future. And the transition, definitely, suddenly you're in Canada and you have your own bank account, you have to pay the bills yourself, you have to manage your own money day to day. So that was definitely part of the transition. And back then, at least, even at the age of 18, you couldn't, or at least under the age of 18, you couldn't have a bank account in Pakistan. So we were just not used to managing a lot of these things on our own. And over there, of course, now you had to manage all of that yourself. Culturally, definitely, there was a big difference. We were, what I would call late Generation X, pre-internet, early dial-up era. And there was always a little bit of a lag between what you thought the culture was in a certain place versus what it actually was. And always when you make such a transition, there's always that urge to fit in. And at the same time, I think what helped me was I'd always been a bit of an individual. I didn't fit into any particular box. And of course, there was a lot of guilt about this investment my parents had made in me. And, I think that kept me on the straight and narrow and allowed it to be, sort of focus a little less on the fitting in and a little bit more on what the goals were.
Wonderful. And thank you for being so candid about that. I think that's a very important message. And it's very relatable. I'm sure it will be relatable for a lot of people that that sense of responsibility and that subconscious guilt that creeps in when hardworking parents have invested so much in you does tend to keep us on the right track. So, moving on from there, your marriage to the Constellation Software Organization, which is a huge conglomerate, a very exemplary one to say the least. How did that come by? And how did the journey start from there, leading to what is now known as Contour Software?
So my career actually started before Constellation. And I remember my third year in university.
Mhm.
Whenever I was, in that endeavor of, the SATs, the TOEFLs, doing all these university applications, the plan had always been at a high level, I'm going to study in abroad somewhere, get some experience, and then come back. How and for what purpose, I didn't know, but that was the goal. And of course, once you actually move there, then new goals come up. First you complete your degree, then you want your experience, then you want your master's degree, then you want your citizenship there. And that potential of that move starts to appear less and less likely. I'm very thankful that the stars aligned and it worked out. But um, during during the degree, um, I think it was about 3 years in, when we were so sought after that even tech companies from the US would fly over into Canada, and they were willing to even resolve our visa issues for internships in the US. So this is what so we had the same sort of hopefulness that I think graduates that have come out in 2021 and 2022 have felt, where employers are fighting over you. And then suddenly 9/11, and then the dot com bust. And then suddenly no one was hiring. So there was an employment freeze in the tech industry, especially in North America. And um, so my friends and colleagues, they were all from Canada. They could just wait it out. For me, the clock was ticking. There was a visa every day that I didn't get the job. And so, thankfully, I got a job, not exactly in my industry, but there was a home building company, and they were looking to implement a software that most of the bigger builders were running on. And I had my software engineering background. I had a second degree in business management. And so they had this thought that either I can help them implement it, or perhaps um, they weren't so happy about the price tag of the software. So they thought maybe we can build something. So that's how I started with them. And the role evolved. It was from a Canadian perspective, it was a small to medium with about $20 million in revenue. And uh, within a month or so, coincidence, I get a temporarily bigger assignment. And within that month, I did well enough that that became my permanent responsibility, which was the sales and marketing. Um, and so the next 3 or 4 years in this smaller company, I got a lot more breadth of responsibility than I would have if I'd gone into a much bigger organization. So I think that really helped. But I was still not in the industry I had studied for. The good news was that a software company was trying to sell me the software that they had for this industry, the home builder software. And at business school, the head of that software company came looking, and that's how we connected. And the company was small enough that even the chairman and founder was there on the day I completed my interview process. So it was the right time to join the company. They had been around since 95, but they had only about 9 months earlier, they had gone public. Um, so they were much smaller. today they're the largest Canadian software company. They're the seventh or eighth largest global software company. But back then, it was small enough that all the senior leadership you could interact with them and build a relationship with. And if you did something, you know, well, you could kind of, have an impact.
So that is where, as a professional, your career, in a new space, in a new environment started. And I'm sure it provided a very good foundation for you, a clearer vision, knowing how to move forward. And then comes into play, you're stepping into a very long-term relationship, as we see with Constellation Software. Tell us a little about that.
So this was Jan 2007. And again, I think what happened in the first couple of months or month and a half really helped um, to set the foundations for the trust I was able to build within the organization. So we had a post acquisition. There was something that I was able to achieve that was unexpected, which reaped a lot of rewards. And ultimately, again, because the company was small enough, Mark Leonard, Dexter, everybody, it was visible to everyone. And some of these people have gone in to be, CFO of other operating groups. And so all those people that were, part of the leadership, it was visible to them. So I think that helped to set the stage for, the person that you can trust. And then we had some coincidences. There was a project we outsourced to a company in Karachi. Then we came very close to acquiring a US based company, which had an office in Karachi that I got to come and do the due diligence of. And then ultimately we acquired a UK based company that again had an office in Karachi.
Okay.
So Karachi's bell rung thrice, and ultimately, it was okay. Now, Bilal, you're not going to Islamabad. You're going to Karachi.
All right.
So that's where it began. But ultimately, then Lahore, then Islamabad. We were able to grow it.
Fantastic. So 2010 to now 2023, stepping into your 13th year. If you were to briefly divide this journey of Contour Software specifically into a span of, let's say, 4 to 5 years, we call it exponential growth, but for people, they would be interested to know कि अच्छा exponential growth होती कैसे, ऐसे इदारे की, which started with 12 log, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm the 13th.
You're the 13th. So. And now 1,800 plus people. So what were certain things that you did or needed to do which brought you to where you are today as one of the most sought after organizations in the region?
So I think we were an experiment in the beginning. We were an experiment. We had a couple of people within the parent organization who felt this may work. There were others that would like it to work, and there were a lot of people that doubted it would work.
Okay.
So it was an experiment, but we'd seen some other companies, that had offshore staffing centers, but we were in a group of small to medium business units that had all, very few of them had experience with an onshore offshore sort of model on a long-term basis. So it was still early years with that sort of model. A very small part of our overall organization started to experiment with this with me. And it was, bit by bit, 2 people, 5 people, 7 people, 10 people, and, one division to another, bit by bit, we became from an experiment to an option. And I think ultimately, it was years of, that sort of effort before we became more of a necessity. So I would say, experiment, option, necessity. That's how I would say the 5 years.
That's a very interesting perspective because generally, one would expect a person with your responsibility, as we said, the sarbara of the organization to say, these are certain values that we inculcated in the first 5 years, but your approach and the way you're explaining it is very real. And I think that's what the audience is going to enjoy listening to also. Now, let's shift gears a little bit and let's take it on the lighter front. staying in the professional lane, but yet थोड़ी सी हल्की फुल्की गुफ्तगू भी बहुत ज़रूरी होती है. So Bilal, as a professional, it is almost unheard of कि कोई एक शख्स कहीं भी जिंदगी में, दोस्ती में, रिलेशनशिप में, लीव अलोन इदारे में इतना अरसा टिका रहे, कायम rahe. There are always players out there who sometimes make it uncomfortable. Sometimes life brings forward such twists and turns. Has at any point, as just as a working professional, not as an MD, has it ever struck you that, acha, this direction only, am I doing the right thing? Am I heading the right way? I mean, would you recommend this path to other professionals out there? And how have you maintained this in this day and age where people are job hopping within months?
I think it's a few different things. There's Mark Leonard, our founder. He talks about the 10,000 hour rule.
Okay.
That if you put enough time and a certain amount of time towards anything, that's how you become an expert.
Interesting.
So Constellation is it's all about long-term bets. So every acquisition we do, it's for life. It's not a 5-year in and out model. It is an acquisition that we're doing for the rest of the life of that business, the employees, the customer. So that long-term orientation has been part of their compensation model, how they evaluate people, how they coach and mentor people. And that, I think struck a chord with me. And especially with the goal of, trying to make a difference, trying to make something that's a little bit different. I feel the only way you'll achieve that is if you give it a bit of a long-term sort of effort. And I mean, when we started off, the goals were smaller and they were tied to how small the parent organization was. And then, of course, as we grew, as the parent organization grew, the thought that this can be a lot bigger and serve the company in all areas rather than just one or two areas. So that's how, bit by bit, as we grew in certain areas, succeeded in certain areas, other experiments came forward, little experiments one by one, and that's how, we were able to expand what we've been doing.
And I think all the efforts were probably reiterated with the recent acquisition that took place on local ground under the Contour software banner, which was last year, 2022. So congratulations on that, because it's set a new benchmark. And I think it's probably given even more confidence to your organization and to you.
And I mean, that's an example. I mean, a few years ago, our parent company was only focused on the mature markets. Ultimately, they did start to acquire in the emerging markets, but selectively.
Right.
And if we hadn't been here for a long time, if there weren't people other than myself also that are part of the team that have been with the company and given it this long-term go, we wouldn't have developed that sort of trust.
Right.
So I think that's again been a key reason why we've been able to do that.
So Bilal, 2 questions for you. One is that if you are hosting, housing, however you want to put it, 1,800 plus employees who are like a family for Contour software, there's bound to be people of all age groups with all kinds of experiences from all kinds of backgrounds. And one thing that a lot of industry professionals talk about and find an interesting challenge, to put it aptly, is the generational difference, because the mindset is different, the want is different, the approach is different. And even though that can add value in its ways, but we can't deny that there are blockades or roadblocks that come along the way when people have completely different mindsets. So that's the first question. And linking it to the second question, which is values. And what values hold these different generations together that are important to Contour software and that hold a very special place in your life as a professional. Please, if you could shed some light on these 2 things.
So I think when we started 2010 in Karachi, we were, I wouldn't use the word lucky. I would say we had it a little bit easy in the sense that there were a number of people who had about 8 years of professional work experience who were becoming available. Uh, and the requirements we were getting at the time from onshore were for people with about 3+ years experience.
Mhm.
And somehow people with about 8 years of experience tended to have the right maturity, experience level, communication, etc.
Mhm.
And so we started off just stumbling on this recipe of a person who was getting close to 30. And uh, the reality was they had already done some experimentation and now they were looking to settle down.
Right.
And so that worked well for us. And we kind of got into this recipe. And then 2014, we start in Lahore, and there just aren't those people anymore.
Okay.
And alongside, the requirements were for people who had experience with some of these newer technologies.
Mhm.
And what happens is that people can get anchored in certain technologies, and it's a little bit harder for them to traverse from one technology to another.
Right.
और जो नया बच्चा आ रहा होता है उसने सीखी वो नई टेक्नोलॉजी होती है,
बिल्कुल.
तो वो उस पर्सपेक्टिव से भी हमें जो लोग मिल रहे थे जो कि उस टेक्नोलॉजी को सही तरह से उनके पास स्किल सेट था, वो भी यंगर जनरेशन के थे.
सही.
और डेफिनेटली हमने ऑब्जर्व किया कि लिटिल बिट लेस कंफर्ट विद क्रिटिक, थोड़ा सा आपको ज़्यादा इंगेजमेंट उनके साथ कहीं ज़्यादा
Exactly.
इंगेजमेंट करनी होती
Right.
थी. और ये एक ऐसा टाइम था इसमें मैं मेरी टीम में आई वाज स्टार्टिंग टू गेट सम डेप्यूटीज टू जॉइन एंड हेल्प मी.
अच्छा.
तो अब इधर मैं उनको बहुत ज़्यादा इस चीज़ पे मेंटर कर रहा था क्योंकि मैंने 1.5-2 साल जो खुद इसको हैंडल किया था. तो to an extent, I have the help of or the aid of having stepped back.
Okay.
When I step back and I look at it, um, I have to remember that those people that had 8 years experience,
Mhm.
उनके जो पहले 4, 5, 6 साल थे उसमें उन्होंने भी experimentation की थी.
Right.
So is it just that each generation is seeing the newer generation as different, or were we perhaps not so different?
Right.
And it's just that it was, that was then, and now we're in a different stage, so we're looking at it from a different perspective.
Hmm.
तो एक तो ये था. अब दूसरा ये था कि डेफिनेटली हमारे यहाँ बिकॉज वी हैड स्टार्टेड विद दीज स्मॉल टीम्स,
Hmm.
ज़्यादातर हमने सीनियर लोगों को हायर किया. वी हैड अ रेपुटेशन इन कराची that we don't hire new grads. We only were
Gotcha.
hiring experienced people.
Right.
We would go to Fast campus. The 4th, 5th year of our existence, we started going there.
Okay.
And even the kids over there knew कि आप लोग तो hire ही नहीं करते हैं new grads को.
अच्छा.
Ultimately, हमारी कई teams थी अब जो कि established थी, lots of good seniors there.
Mhm.
And, for various reasons, we started our new grad program. और काफ़ी fears और trepidations थी onshore के कुछ managers उनकी भी कि बच्चा आएगा हम उसको सिखाएंगे वो छोड़ के चला जाएगा.
सही. सही.
But our experience has actually been different.
Okay.
We have people 2014, 2015, 2016 to onwards that have joined with us, and 3, 4, 5 years they've been with us. And we've had people leave at all experience levels.
Right.
And we haven't seen, and I think I credit it for the fact that once we had that group of senior mentors available locally, and then of course onshore we have people with 20, 30+ years experience.
Right.
So, but that combination, and especially the local seniors already being there, I think that made a huge difference.
Right. And then the combination, in addition to that, as I said, the second part of the question, which would be certain values which probably help gel people together, bring people together, or retain them, or motivate them, or convince them to stay on with an organization which they feel is bringing value to them personally and professionally. So what are some of those values at Contour Software that you feel work well across all generations?
So one thing especially that I saw in Canada, आप ये नहीं कह सकते हैं कि discrimination जो है वो 100% eliminate हुई भी हो कहीं से भी.
ठीक है.
But the amount of effort systemically to avoid it seeping into your decision process. वो आपको वहाँ पे नज़र आती थी. और यहाँ पे इवन आपने रेज्यूमे पे जो चीज़ें लिख के देनी है, they are providing a million ways for somebody to discriminate against yourself, जो आपसे इंटरव्यू में पूछा जाएगा.
सही.
तो हमने अपना जो इंटरव्यू प्रोसेस बनाया ख़ास तौर पे, उसमें इन चीज़ों को हमने बिल्कुल एलिमिनेट किया. इट वाज
Okay.
ऑल अबाउट, आर यू गोइंग टू बी एबल टू डू द वर्क,
Okay.
and are you going to be able to, and ultimately the final interview is by somebody who's not even in the country, and bias tends to be local mostly. So we've been especially careful and interested. One of the things that was big in university in Canada was having people from diverse backgrounds in a team. And the more diverse the team, the better the results it would deliver.
ठीक है.
So that's the sort of thing, we have never had go to universities that we've gone to, or certain types of experience or from certain places. We've always wanted to keep it as diverse as we could. Similarly, sometimes unconscious bias happens. We had a lot of trouble getting men into our HR team, and
Interesting.
even tougher to get anybody who's a woman into the IT systems administration team.
Very interesting.
And we consciously made a choice to break those barriers. So some of it is just this, focus on diversity. So one of the other things, I learned this from my mentor. Actually, we studied it also, but I saw one of my mentors doing it in action. Was a bottom-up approach where you actually take the input of the people around you, and we have a continuous process where we have these meetings where the key purpose is to take two types of feedback based on which we do continuous improvement, both in terms of our local environment and facilities as well as the onshore-offshore process.
Right.
And I think what people, I felt they felt a sense of ownership because they would frequently see their feedback put into action. So this is one thing. And then the third one, which is probably hardest, something I got to implement in my first year in Constellation. Again, my mentor, that was his target, which was to under-promise and over-deliver, which is very hard to do. But, for the most part, we've done our best to exceed expectations just by under-promising and then, hopefully over-delivering.
Fantastic. Now, Bilal, if we were to talk about giving back to the community, it's a very important aspect of all progressive organizations. But the analysis and the research that I was fortunate enough to have done with regard to Contour software, I got to know about ventures and projects and the depth and the detail of the investment that is being done by Contour software. It's unheard of in most other places and organizations in Pakistan. And I say this with regard to the purpose, the vision, and then how many people, or the breadth of how many people it is covering. So I'd like you to please talk to the youth today. I think it would be very encouraging, and let them know firsthand what you are doing to give back to the community.
Probably, if we talk about on the skills development front, that's probably our biggest focus. And it's definitely it's tied to the idea that we're benefiting from this ecosystem, and if we don't give back into the ecosystem, then the fruits for tomorrow, they're just not going to be there. About 2.5 years ago, I joined the skills development committee within Pasha, the Software Companies Association, and we focused on a number of things. We have for the first time and across the board understanding within the government, regardless of who's in power, that IT exports are the most likely solution out of the economic problems of the country. So the government finally started to see the prospect that in terms of jobs as well as forex, we are the answer. And so historically, what was happening was all the government money on skills training used to get implemented by training companies, and the least, the lowest bidder, of course. The problem there was that those companies didn't have hands-on expertise of actually doing the work, and so the industry did not see the results of this. And secondly, all the companies, all the big companies, Pasha, were unified that about 10, maybe 15% of our graduates are industry ready.
Right.
These are people coming out of university. And so we have these two issues. But finally, we saw um, the right people in Pasha that I was able to engage with. Government was suddenly willing to listen and, in fact, very eager. Um, so the first thing we did was um, to see how we could increase the linkages between industry and academia. And I talked to my own team members. You'll probably talk to one of them. Um, and we found out that a few of them were teaching these elective courses where universities were looking for people from hands-on backgrounds to teach those parts of the courses which required, current hands-on technical expertise.
Right.
Um, so we took that, um, and we decided to do a pilot project. Some of my team members were doing this on the testing side,
Right.
and we decided to do a pilot project on the web engineering side.
ठीक है.
और ये हमने सर सैयद यूनिवर्सिटी में पाशा की फैसिलिटेशन के साथ एक पायलट प्रोजेक्ट चलाया, इंडस्ट्री एकेडमिया ब्रिज प्रोग्राम. उसको सॉफ्टवेयर एक्सपोर्ट बोर्ड ने, गवर्नमेंट ने ऑब्जर्व करके पिक किया, और उसको उन्होंने डजन्स ऑफ अदर यूनिवर्सिटीज़ के लिए उसकी फंडिंग प्रोवाइड कर दी. तो दैट went on to be picked up. Now, the second one, what we saw, a number of countries have started to solve their skills problems. Google has started hiring people who don't necessarily have a bachelor's degree, let alone a computer science or software engineering
बिल्कुल
degree.
ठीक.
और इंडिया में हमने देखा कि बूट कैंप प्रोग्राम्स के थ्रू उन्होंने अपना स्किल्स का जो डिमांड सप्लाई इम्बैलेंस है उसको हल किया.
ठीक.
तो एक हमने बूट कैंप का स्ट्रक्चर प्रपोज किया, और उसको भी सॉफ्टवेयर एक्सपोर्ट बोर्ड ने अप्रूव कर लिया, उसकी फंडिंग प्रोवाइड कर दी मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ आईटी ने. अब चैलेंज ये था कि हमने रिक्वायरमेंट रखी थी कि इसको इंडस्ट्री ड्रिवन होना ज़रूरी है, वरना उसका कोई फ़ायदा नहीं होगा. So now we needed to, for the first time in the history of the industry, bring together a joint venture of tech companies who would work towards this. So वो हमने किया. So it became the first instance of the industry collaborating to solve our own problems, doing a joint venture like this, doing an industry-driven bootcamp program. So that's an ongoing program. There are 4,000 students to be trained across the country, but Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad specific. And the ripple impact here is that this one has been, again, picked up now by the Punjab IT Board, KPIT Board, Sindh IT Board, NAVTech. The special assistant to the Prime Minister is talking to us about it, and they are basically looking to scale it and divert money to these organizations to be able to run this program at scale in all these different, at the tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities, the different provinces. So I think that's something that, holds a lot of potential.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for explaining that in so much detail, Bilal. And I think people will be very happy to understand in layman's language, agar samjhaya jaye. So the youth is the future, it's the present and the future. And such an established organization and professionals of such an established organization giving back to the community in terms of practical hands-on experience, skills, and expertise to the students who aspire to be where Bilal and his company are today, is the first of many steps that will definitely benefit Pakistan as a whole. So, with great power comes great responsibility. And with such a big organization, you're bound to have a very important and crucial role in the industry. What kind of role would you proudly say is Contour Software playing in the industry? And second part of the question is, what kind of a role do you think that certain other players in the industry are playing, which they're setting as a precedent which you really wish they wouldn't, and it leads to a lot of misconceptions about the industry?
I think there are three ways that we're bringing value to this ecosystem.
Hmm.
Firstly, our core purpose since the beginning as an offshore center, which has become a global center
Hmm.
for truly global enterprise software company. So the sort of work that people are getting to do, and the sort of people they're getting to work with, and the sort of customers they're working for, the impact and the depth and quality of work that they have to deliver, I think it's raising the bar of the professionals. It is providing a very stable and fulfilling, um, professional environment for people. So that, first and foremost, that's moving from 13 people to 1800 plus.
Hmm.
That's probably the biggest contribution we've made. Um, the second one, I would say, there's a lot of talk and a lot of understanding in Pakistan around private equity and VCs and startups, etc. Um, but not enough or hardly any around mature companies and their exits. So,
Right.
Constellation Software, what we do is we acquire market leading software companies that have spent 20, 30, maybe sometimes longer than that years to build a mature market leading sort of presence.
Right.
And then maybe the founder wants to retire, maybe there's some sort of exit required for estate planning. You still have those employees, those customers, that product.
True.
So what we do is we acquire that business for the life of that business.
Ah.
And that's something that is new in this ecosystem. So the first one that we did in Pakistan, the founding gentleman, he back in the year 2000 when he started Autosoft Dynamics, he
Mm.
brought 30 years of banking industry experience to his startup,
Right.
and 22 years of time and effort later, there was a time when the family wanted to exit for estate planning.
Right.
So that's a first of hopefully many,
Right.
which is something of a precedent for this industry.
Hmm.
And thirdly, what we talked about with the supply side initiatives, which we feel are very important, so that we can continue to grow that export oriented effort that the country needs.
Hmm.
There's a lot of need, a lot of competition for talent,
Right.
and the countries that actually have the skilled workforces and can deliver them, that's the difference. So that's something that we're also over the past couple of years working on. So these probably would be the three. Um, in terms of what I would like the ecosystem to, I wouldn't say de-emphasize, but um, the past dozen years I saw a little bit too much emphasis. Emphasis on startups is not the problem.
Okay.
The problem is when you tell new grads, people that are starting their careers,
Yes.
that this is the way. Um, Now we've got, you can, if you Google, there's a research based article using statistics from the United States,
Hmm.
where you have access to capital, you have purchasing power, you have the proper ecosystem, and over there, 1 out of 10 startups will succeed.
Hmm.
And their statistics show that the average age of the successful entrepreneur is 45 years old. And when they started their startup, they were about 42. So Mark Zuckerberg is an anomaly.
Yeah.
And most startup founders who will be successful will be those that go into industry, they learn their craft, they're out of industry, out of university, you're coming out perhaps as a software engineer. You don't know marketing, you don't know finance, you don't have a network of people that trust you, that you can trust, that you can call on for, for favors, for advice, to help you make the right connections or to become your investors or your partners.
Yes.
So those are the sorts of things where startups are great, but we need to de-emphasize it on those that are just starting their careers,
Okay.
and provide the right guidance so that they later on have a much greater chance of being successful as startup founders.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, as Bilal said, that startups are absolutely great. And the concept of entrepreneurship has evolved into what we know as the startup ecosphere. Having said that, there always needs to be a certain exposure, experience that comes with the passage of time, which may or may not come being part of a startup organization. And the opportunity is one that you have to give yourself. So the youngsters need to be open minded enough to give themselves an opportunity to start, to fail, and to start again. Be it the startup route, be it being part of somebody else's business venture, or be it as part of an organization like Contour Software. Now let's completely shift gears and let's go into cruise control, Bilal. Let's sit back and let people get to know a little about just Syed Bilal Mahmood, not managing director, Contour Software, and we'll wrap up the conversation on that also. So, golf is one thing that you have your heart set out into. Other than that, Bilal, क्या क्या करते हैं अपने free time में? What brings you pleasure?
Golf is the past, I would say, 6 years. Growing up, it was cricket, but we
Right.
played a lot of soccer and volleyball and rugby and badminton and ping pong and basketball, hockey. This was pre-internet era, pre-Nintendo era,
Okay.
and people used to spend their time outside. So sports were always a big thing. I played a lot of tennis, and yeah, the past 6 years it's a lot of golf.
Okay.
There was a time when I was listening to maybe 12 hours of music a day.
Wow.
So music's always been there. Food is a big interest.
What about movies?
Movies, yes, absolutely. A lot of movies. I used to read a lot of fiction books.
Okay.
Growing up. Hardly get the time for that anymore. So movies and TV is a lot easier.
Okay. All right. So
yeah.
those are your me time preferences. And yes, of course, with the passage of time, things evolve. You may not have 12 hours to listen to music anymore, but there must be something on repeat on your playlist nowadays. What is it?
I'm really amazed by the some of the stars that we've got over the past 10, 12 years. Coke Studio, etc. have
Right.
done a great job of highlighting them. Back in the day, we had 4, 5, 6 bands, and that's what we would listen to. At least when we talk about Pakistani music. But now we've got so many women, so many men, so many different sub genres. So it's a lot of I like to keep it mix it up and try all sorts of music.
That's fantastic. And the most important and most unexpected question for you. Biryani with aloo or without aloo?
With aloo.
With aloo.
With
And
aloo.
is that because you have spent a good number of years in Karachi, or is just that a personal preference?
I think, yeah, I've spent time in Karachi. I've had people who are in Islamabad but from Karachi
Okay.
who've made a lot of biryani. So that might be it.
That might be it. And you've heard it from the boss himself. Biryani with aloo it is. Thank you so much for being with us today, Bilal.
My pleasure.
It was absolutely wonderful talking to you. Thank you to the audience for listening. And once again, thank you for being with us throughout this journey of 12 episodes. Till next season, we look forward to welcoming you back again. This is me, Sulmeen Ansari, saying thank you and Allah Hafiz.